Welcome to Prod School. I'm back with another deep dive into product management interviews, and today we're tackling something that separates senior PMs from everyone else: product strategy questions. If you're preparing for principal PM, senior PM, or CPO level interviews at companies like Reddit, Meta, or Google, strategy questions are where your career trajectory gets decided. These aren't about feature prioritization or user research tactics. They're about whether you can think like an executive who shapes entire platform directions. Here's what makes strategy questions different from every other PM interview question type. While product design questions test your user empathy and analytical questions test your data skills, strategy questions test your business judgment. Can you identify market opportunities that others miss? Can you balance short-term investor pressure with long-term competitive positioning? Can you make trade-offs between different stakeholder interests while building sustainable business models? Most candidates fail strategy questions because they approach them like feature brainstorming sessions. They jump straight into solution mode, listing product ideas without understanding market dynamics or competitive positioning. They ignore business model implications, resource constraints, and execution complexity. They present wishful thinking instead of defensible strategic reasoning. The companies asking these questions want to see executive-level product thinking. They want to know if you can walk into a board meeting and present a coherent vision for where the platform should go over the next 5 years. They want to see if you understand unit economics, competitive moats, and how to sequence strategic initiatives to manage risk while delivering results. Today's interview demonstrates exactly that kind of strategic thinking. You're about to watch a senior director challenge a candidate on Reddit's 5-year strategy. This isn't a theoretical exercise. It's the kind of strategic analysis that actual Reddit executives work through when making platform decisions that affect hundreds of millions of users and billions in market value. But before we dive in, I want you to grab a pen and paper. This interview works best when you actively engage with the strategic thinking process. Here's how to get maximum value. First, when the interviewer asks the initial strategy question, pause the video and spend 5 minutes outlining your own strategy. What would your 5-year strategy for Reddit look like? Don't overthink it, just capture your initial instincts. Second, as the candidate works through their strategic framework, compare their approach to yours. Are they asking clarifying questions you missed? Are they identifying competitive threats you overlooked? Are their strategic options more sophisticated than what you initially considered? Third, pay special attention to how they handle the interviewer's pushback. Strategy interviews aren't just about having good ideas, they're about defending those ideas under pressure. Notice how the candidate responds when challenged on market validation, execution complexity, and competitive response. This is where many candidates fall apart. Fourth, focus on the business reasoning behind each strategic choice. Why does the candidate prioritize community intelligence systems over international expansion? How do they think about risk management and resource allocation? What assumptions are they making about Reddit's unique competitive advantages? The interview covers several critical strategy concepts you need to master: market positioning analysis, understanding where your platform fits in the competitive landscape and what makes your position defensible; business model evolution, how to diversify revenue streams without compromising core platform value; platform network effects, why some strategic moves create sustainable advantages while others can be easily copied by competitors. You'll also see advanced product portfolio thinking. How do you balance platform optimization strategies that improve existing capabilities against platform expansion strategies that create new product categories? How do you sequence strategic initiatives to manage execution risk while delivering stakeholder value? One thing that makes this interview particularly valuable is the level of business sophistication. This isn't a junior PM discussing feature improvements. This is executive-level analysis of unit economics, competitive moats, and long-term positioning that requires understanding platform business models, technology trends, and market dynamics. The candidate demonstrates how to think about Reddit's unique competitive advantages, community governance, discussion architecture, and accumulated knowledge, while addressing real business pressures around revenue diversification and market expansion. They show how to balance community trust preservation with commercial growth objectives. Most importantly, you'll see how to present strategic thinking that acknowledges trade-offs and implementation complexity, rather than pretending every strategic option is equally viable. Senior PMs need to understand resource constraints, organizational capabilities, and realistic timelines for strategic initiatives. Watch how the candidate handles the fundamental tension between optimizing for short-term financial performance versus building long-term strategic defensibility. This tension appears in every major platform strategy decision, and how you navigate it reveals your understanding of sustainable competitive advantage. The interview also covers something most PM content ignores: how to present strategy to different stakeholders. Notice how the candidate adapts their communication for board-level presentation versus detailed implementation planning. This stakeholder communication skill is crucial for senior PM roles. After watching, I want you to evaluate your own strategic thinking. Could you have defended your initial Reddit strategy under the same level of questioning? Did you consider the same competitive threats and market dynamics? How would you have responded to challenges about execution complexities and timeline pressure? Strategic thinking is what separates senior PMs from feature managers. It's the difference between executing someone else's vision and creating the vision that others execute. Companies pay premium salaries for PMs who can think strategically because strategic mistakes cost millions, while strategic advantages drive lasting success. Whether you're preparing for your next PM interview or trying to level up your strategic thinking in your current role, this interview provides a framework for approaching complex platform strategy decisions with the sophistication that senior roles require. All right, let's dive into this strategic analysis. You're about to see executive-level product thinking in action. Grab that pen and paper, and let's get started.
Welcome, Adrian. I'm David, Senior Director of Product Management here. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks, David.
Glad to be here. We're going to work through a strategic exercise today. I want you to assume the role of Reddit's Chief Product Officer and define our 5-year strategy. I have kept this intentionally open-ended because I want to see how you approach complex platform strategy at the executive level.
Thank you, David. So I am assuming the role of the CPO of Reddit, and I have to define our 5-year roadmap. Let me take a moment to understand the key parameters that will shape my approach. First, regarding our primary objective here, are we optimizing for profitable growth, market share expansion, or are we trying to create an entirely new category? Given our public company status, I assume revenue diversification is a priority, but I want to confirm what winning looks like from your perspective.
Revenue diversification is critical. We're seeing margin compression in digital advertising and need to demonstrate multiple monetization vectors. Focus on 5-year sustainable positioning with acknowledgement of public market pressures. What other parameters matter for your analysis?
All right. Moving on, there are critical areas I need to understand. First, are there any hard constraints around brand positioning, regulatory compliance, or platform dependencies I should factor in? Second, what's our risk tolerance for cannibalizing existing revenue streams while building new ones? Third, which of Reddit's core competitive advantages should I lean into most heavily? Our community governance model, our discussion architecture, or the accumulated community knowledge base we've built across every conceivable topic? And finally, how do you assess our organizational readiness for significant strategic pivots versus incremental evolution?
No major constraints beyond maintaining community trust, which is non-negotiable. Risk tolerance is moderate. We can accept some short-term revenue trade-offs for long-term positioning, but I want to see how you identify our competitive advantages rather than me telling you. And don't assume organizational readiness. Factor capability gaps into your strategic options. Walk me through your analysis of where Reddit stands competitively.
Let me systematically analyze our competitive position across multiple dimensions. Starting with market dynamics, we're operating in a maturing social platform market where digital advertising margins are compressing industry-wide. Our unit economics show strong engagement depth. Users spend significantly more time per session compared to algorithmic-driven platforms, but we're weaker on user acquisition efficiency and have limited international penetration. From a platform architecture perspective, we occupy a unique position. Most platforms optimize for engagement maximization through algorithmic content surfacing and viral mechanics. We optimize for discussion persistence and community knowledge accumulation through threaded conversations and democratic moderation. This creates lasting value that appreciates over time rather than depreciating after initial consumption. Our primary competitive moats are the trust relationships we've built with communities over nearly 2 decades, our discussion threading model that creates information architecture other platforms can't easily replicate, and this massive repository of community-moderated knowledge that's accumulated across every conceivable topic. The moderation quality we achieve through community self-governance is something centralized platforms struggle to match at scale. Looking at technology shifts, AI capabilities create opportunities for us to leverage community knowledge without compromising the authenticity that makes us valuable. Regulatory pressure around data privacy and algorithmic transparency actually favors platforms like ours with community-controlled governance. There's also this interesting dynamic where professional networking is becoming commoditized, while authentic expertise sharing remains highly differentiated. Our business model vulnerability is stark: 95% dependence on advertising revenue in a margin-compressing market. We also have underdeveloped creator monetization compared to platforms like YouTube, TikTok, or even newer entrants like Substack. International expansion has been slower than competitors, leaving massive addressable markets underserved.
That analysis identifies our positioning, but I'm not convinced you've articulated why that positioning is defensible long-term. Social platforms have notoriously weak moats. Users can migrate quickly when something better emerges. What makes you think Reddit's community model creates sustainable competitive advantages versus just user habit and switching costs?
You're challenging a critical assumption, and I need to be more precise about what creates genuine defensibility versus superficial stickiness.
Reddit's moats aren't just about user habit. They're about accumulated institutional knowledge and community governance that can't be easily replicated. When a community like our Ask Historians spends years developing expertise validation processes and knowledge standards, that institutional infrastructure doesn't transfer to new platforms. The community members might migrate, but the governance systems, moderation expertise, and accumulated knowledge architecture stays embedded in Reddit's platform. More fundamentally, our threaded discussion model creates information persistence that timeline-based platforms can't match. A technical discussion from 3 years ago remains discoverable and valuable, unlike social media posts that become obsolete. This creates compound value, where platform worth increases with time rather than decays. The network effects are also more resilient than typical social platforms. Instead of following individual accounts, users participate in interest-based communities with dozens of active contributors. Replicating an entire community ecosystem requires moving not just users, but moderators, institutional knowledge, governance frameworks, and cultural norms simultaneously. That's significantly harder than individual account migration. However, you're right that this isn't unassailable. A platform with superior community management tools, better discovery mechanisms, or more attractive monetization for community contributors could potentially fracture our position, which is why strategic evolution is critical rather than defensive positioning. Got it. Let's continue. Let me reframe this as product portfolio strategy. The first category consists of platform optimization strategies that amplify our existing product differentiation and deepen our competitive moats in community discussion infrastructure. The second category involves platform expansion strategies that leverage our community expertise to create new product categories where we'd establish first-mover advantages in markets that don't currently exist. For platform optimization, I'm looking at how we can make our core community discussion product significantly better than any competitor while expanding monetization within that core competency. For platform expansion, I'm examining how our unique community governance and knowledge aggregation capabilities could enable entirely new product experiences that create new revenue streams and competitive positioning. The key distinction is that optimization strategies compete on improving what social platforms already do, while expansion strategies compete on doing things that aren't currently served by existing platform categories. The risk-return profiles are fundamentally different, as are the capability requirements and competitive responses we'd face. That framing makes sense. Start with your platform optimization strategies. But I want specifics on product differentiation, not just business model improvements. How would you actually make Reddit's core product meaningfully better? For platform optimization, I see three distinct product strategies that would substantially differentiate our core community discussion experience. First is advanced community intelligence systems. The product thesis is that we build AI-powered tools that make community discussions significantly smarter and more valuable without compromising authenticity. This means developing contextual knowledge synthesis that can identify when discussions are rehashing topics covered extensively in past threads, provide relevant historical context from community archives, and surface expert contributors based on their demonstrated knowledge rather than social metrics. The product differentiation comes from discussion quality improvements that no other platform can match. When someone posts a technical question, the platform could automatically surface the three most knowledgeable community members, provide links to previous high-quality discussions on similar topics, and even highlight when emerging consensus differs from historical community positions. This creates discussion value that pure engagement optimization can't deliver. The second optimization strategy is democratic governance infrastructure. Here, we'd build the most sophisticated community self-governance tools available on any platform. This includes transparent rule evolution systems, where communities can democratically modify their guidelines, conflict resolution mechanisms that help communities handle disputes constructively, and governance analytics that help moderators understand community health trends. The product differentiation comes from enabling community autonomy at a level no centralized platform can match. Communities could essentially become self-governing micro-platforms within Reddit, each with customized rules, moderation approaches, and even economic models. This creates switching costs because leaving Reddit means rebuilding entire governance infrastructures. The third optimization approach is professional networking. Instead of competing with LinkedIn's connection-based model, we'd enable reputation-based professional networking, where expertise gets validated through community contributions rather than job titles or mutual connections. Users could build professional reputations through valuable contributions to relevant communities with verification systems that authenticate expertise based on community feedback rather than credential checking. The product differentiation is authentic professional networking based on demonstrated knowledge rather than self-promotion. A software engineer's reputation would come from helpful contributions to programming communities, not from crafting the perfect LinkedIn post about leadership insights. These optimization strategies sound reasonable but incremental. The community intelligence concept particularly concerns me. How is that different from what Google or Microsoft could build with superior AI capabilities? Walk me through why these create sustainable differentiation rather than features competitors could copy.
Sure. So, for community intelligence systems, the differentiation isn't the AI technology itself. You're right that Google or Microsoft have superior technical capabilities. The differentiation comes from the community-specific training data and governance integration that large tech companies structurally can't replicate. Our AI systems would be trained on 18 years of community-moderated, high-quality discussions where spam, misinformation, and low-effort content has already been filtered out by expert moderators. More importantly, these systems would operate under community oversight. Each subreddit could configure how AI assistance works, what sources get prioritized, and even disable features they don't want. Google or Microsoft can't offer community-controlled AI because their business models depend on centralized control of algorithmic systems. However, you're identifying a fundamental tension in the optimization approach. These strategies require significant technical investment while competing in existing market categories where established players have resource advantages. Which brings me to why the expansion strategies might offer better strategic positioning.
It's good that you're recognizing that tension. Now, let's hear your platform expansion strategies. But I want you to think like a product strategist, not a business development person. What new product experiences could Reddit uniquely enable that don't exist in current platform categories?
For platform expansion, I'm looking at 3 product categories that don't currently exist but could be uniquely enabled by Reddit's community expertise and discussion architecture. The first is community knowledge commerce.
The product experience would allow communities to package their collective expertise into valuable information products, not individual content creation like YouTube or Substack, but collaborative knowledge products created by entire communities. Think about r/personal finance collectively creating sophisticated financial planning tools, or r/ask historians developing interactive historical research experiences. The product mechanics would involve community consensus systems for knowledge validation, collaborative creation tools for developing information products, and economic frameworks where communities receive revenue based on the value they create. This isn't individual creator monetization, it's community-level knowledge commercialization where collective intelligence becomes a sustainable revenue stream. The second expansion strategy is distributed decision-making infrastructure. The product would enable organizations, institutions, and even governments to leverage Reddit's community governance expertise for complex decision-making processes. Instead of traditional consulting or internal committees, organizations could create structured community discussions with transparent deliberation processes, expert input weighting, and democratic consensus building. The product experience includes decision-making templates based on Reddit's most successful governance models, stakeholder engagement tools that ensure broad input without chaos, and outcome tracking systems that measure decision quality over time. We'd essentially be productizing democracy and collective decision-making as a service. The third expansion approach is authentic social verification. Rather than competing with existing social networks, we'd create verification and reputation systems that other platforms could integrate. Reddit's community validation could become the standard for authentic expertise verification across the internet. If you want to know whether someone actually knows about cybersecurity, machine learning, or legal issues, Reddit community validation would provide more reliable assessment than traditional credentials or social media follower accounts.
These expansion ideas are more interesting, but I'm skeptical about market demand and product-market fit. The community knowledge commerce concept particularly seems complex. How do you validate that communities actually want to create commercial products together rather than just discuss topics? And the decision-making infrastructure sounds like it's solving problems that organizations might not know they have.
Your skepticism is warranted, and let me provide more concrete evidence for why these markets would emerge and how we'd validate demand before major investment. For community knowledge commerce, we actually have proof points already embedded in Reddit behavior patterns. Communities like r/security analysis regularly produce investment research that rivals professional analysts. r/DIY communities create comprehensive guides that outperform commercial alternatives. r/Ask Science provides explanations that are more accessible than academic publications. The expertise and collaborative creation already happen. We'd be adding economic infrastructure to monetize value that communities are already generating for free. The validation approach would start with pilot programs in communities that already demonstrate commercial quality knowledge creation. We'd test revenue sharing models, measure community enthusiasm for economic participation, and analyze whether commercialization improves or degrades discussion quality. The risk mitigation is starting small with communities that explicitly opt into commercial experiments rather than forcing monetization across the platform. For distributed decision-making infrastructure, you're right about organizations not recognizing this problem, but consider the growing crisis in institutional decision-making. Corporate strategy processes that take months and produce mediocre results, government policy development that excludes stakeholder expertise, academic institutions struggling with inclusive governance. There's latent demand for better decision-making processes, but no existing products that serve this need effectively. Our validation strategy would involve partnerships with progressive organizations willing to experiment with community-based decision-making for non-critical decisions first. Measure decision quality, stakeholder satisfaction, and implementation success compared to traditional approaches. Build evidence for superiority before attempting to scale to larger, more conservative institutions. However, I do recognize a fundamental challenge in both expansion strategies. They require behavior change from users and customers who have existing alternatives, even if those alternatives are suboptimal.
You're starting to think more critically about market validation, which is essential for product strategy. And let me tell you, you're describing complex revenue sharing models between Reddit and communities, collaborative commercial creation, and institutional service contracts. These all have significant operational overhead and customer success requirements that Reddit doesn't currently have. How do you factor implementation complexity into your strategic choice?
Let me think through implementation complexity more systematically. The community knowledge commerce model would require building economic infrastructure we don't have, payment processing for community entities, intellectual property frameworks for collaborative creation, dispute resolution systems for revenue sharing conflicts, and customer support for commercial products created by communities rather than Reddit directly. We'd essentially be building Etsy-level marketplace infrastructure plus collaborative creation tools plus community governance systems simultaneously. The distributed decision-making infrastructure has even higher complexity. We'd need enterprise sales capabilities, change management consulting expertise, integration with organizational decision-making systems, and outcome measurement frameworks. This looks less like a product and more like a professional services business that requires capabilities we'd have to acquire rather than build. When I factor in implementation complexity, both expansion strategies require organizational capabilities that would take years to develop and massive investment in non-core competencies. The risk is spreading resources too thin across multiple new product categories, while our core community discussion platform faces competitive pressure. This suggests that a phased approach might be more realistic. Start with platform optimization strategies that build on existing capabilities, use the improved core platform to generate resources and prove execution capability, then selectively expand into new product categories where we can leverage proven systems rather than building everything from scratch. The strategic question becomes, which optimization strategy provides the best foundation for eventual expansion, rather than trying to pursue expansion immediately?
Good. Please proceed. Walk me through your recommended strategic approach.
Given the implementation complexity analysis, I recommend focusing on advanced community intelligence systems as our primary strategic direction, with specific trade-offs. My recommended approach is building AI-powered tools that dramatically improve discussion quality and knowledge discovery within our existing community infrastructure. The product experience involves contextual knowledge synthesis, expert contributor identification, historical discussion surfacing, and community consensus tracking that creates sustainable differentiation because it combines our unique community-moderated content with AI capabilities in ways that centralized platforms can't replicate due to governance conflicts. The strategic logic is that superior discussion quality becomes a platform moat that enables multiple monetization strategies over time. Better discussions increase user retention and engagement depth, which improves our advertising unit economics immediately. They also create conditions for professional community development and knowledge commercialization without requiring complex new business model infrastructure initially. What I'm explicitly choosing not to do and why? I'm not pursuing distributed decision-making infrastructure because it requires enterprise consulting capabilities that would take years to build and don't leverage our core platform strengths. I'm not immediately pursuing community knowledge commerce because the revenue-sharing complexity could destabilize community cultures before we've proven the value proposition. I'm also not focusing on international expansion as the primary strategy because our platform limitations, like English-centric discussions and lack of local flavor, would reduce success rates in new markets. I'm also not pursuing direct competition with LinkedIn, YouTube, or TikTok on their core use cases because that plays to their strengths rather than our unique positioning. The key trade-off is accepting slower user growth in favor of deeper engagement and platform differentiation that enables multiple monetization paths over time rather than betting everything on rapid scale in existing market categories.
That's good, but I want to understand your implementation roadmap. You're talking about AI-powered discussion improvements, but Reddit's current AI capabilities are limited. How do you sequence the technical development while managing the risk that your AI implementations could backfire and damage community trust?
You've identified the critical execution risk. AI implementations that backfire could permanently damage the community trust that's fundamental to our competitive positioning. Let me outline a risk-managed technical development sequence. Phase 1, months 1 through 12, focuses on behind-the-scenes AI assistance that communities don't directly interact with. This includes automated spam detection that's more sophisticated than current systems, duplicate discussion identification that helps moderators without user-facing features, and community health monitoring that provides moderators with insights about discussion patterns and potential issues. The key is that these AI systems support human moderators rather than replacing them, and failures don't directly impact user experience. We measure success through moderator satisfaction, community health improvements, and operational cost reductions rather than user engagement metrics that could incentivize the wrong AI behaviors. Phase 2, months 9 through 24, introduces opt-in AI features where communities can choose to enable enhanced discussion tools. This includes historical context suggestions that surface relevant past discussions, expert contributor highlighting based on community validation rather than algorithmic assessment, and consensus tracking that helps communities understand how opinions evolve over time on contentious topics. Critical implementation details: every AI feature has community override capabilities, transparent explanation of why suggestions are made, and democratic governance controls where communities can configure or disable features. We start with pilot communities that explicitly volunteer to test AI enhancements rather than platform-wide rollouts. Phase 3, months 18 through 36, scales AI assistance based on proven community value and trust maintenance. This could include predictive discussion tools, cross-community knowledge synthesis, and advanced moderation assistance, but only if phases 1 and 2 demonstrate that AI enhancement improves rather than compromise community autonomy. The kill criteria throughout is community trust metrics. If AI implementations reduce community satisfaction with platform governance or increase concerns about algorithmic manipulation, we immediately roll back and pivot to manual community improvement tools rather than automated systems.
Your phasing manages AI implementation risk, but I'm concerned about the business case timeline. Phase 1 doesn't create new revenue streams. Phase 2 is opt-in, which limits adoption. And Phase 3 is conditional on earlier success. How do you justify the strategy to board members and investors who want to see revenue diversification progress on shorter timelines?
Good point. Let me think this through. Give me a minute. The immediate revenue opportunity in Phase 1 comes from operational efficiency improvements that directly impact our cost structure. Better automated moderation reduces our content moderation expenses, which currently run tens of millions annually. Improved community health monitoring reduces churn rates, which increases user lifetime value and advertising inventory quality. These aren't new revenue streams, but they're immediate margin improvements that compound over time. More importantly, Phase 1 creates the technical infrastructure and community trust framework that enables faster deployment of monetizable features in subsequent phases. Without this foundation, any AI-powered monetization attempts would likely fail due to community resistance or technical limitations. For Phase 2, the opt-in approach actually creates competitive advantages rather than adoption limitations. Communities that successfully use AI enhancement tools become testimonials for platform capabilities. This builds organic demand from other communities and demonstrates value to potential enterprise customers who want similar AI-assisted community management capabilities. The enterprise opportunity emerges naturally from our own AI implementation success. If Reddit communities achieve superior discussion quality through AI assistance, organizations will want to license similar capabilities for their internal communities, customer forums, and stakeholder engagement processes. This creates B2B revenue streams without requiring completely new product development. However, I acknowledge the timeline tension. If the board requires faster revenue diversification, we could accelerate enterprise AI tool development in parallel with community AI implementation. The risk is spreading technical resources across consumer and enterprise products simultaneously, but the revenue timeline would be compressed.
You're acknowledging the timeline pressure, but your enterprise AI opportunity seems speculative. What concrete evidence do you have that organizations want Reddit-style community management AI, and how would you validate that market before significant investment?
You're right to push on market validation. Let me outline a validation approach that provides real market signals before major investment. The validation strategy involves 3 parallel tracks over the first 6 months. First, customer development interviews with organizations that already run communities on Reddit, gaming companies, technology firms, educational institutions. Understand their current pain points with community management, willingness to pay for better tools, and specific AI capabilities they'd value most. Second, competitive analysis of existing B2B community management platforms like Discourse, Slack, or Microsoft Teams. Identify market gaps in AI-assisted community features and validate whether superior AI capabilities could create competitive differentiation worth premium pricing. Third, pilot partnerships with organizations willing to test Reddit-style AI community tools in exchange for providing detailed feedback and usage data. Start with companies that already have positive relationships with Reddit communities, reducing sales friction and increasing participation likelihood. The validation criteria include achieving 70% positive feedback from customer development interviews, identifying at least 3 concrete use cases where organizations would pay premium pricing for AI community assistance, and successful pilot implementations with at least 5 partner organizations showing measurable community improvement metrics. If validation succeeds, we'd have evidence-based business case for enterprise AI development. If validation fails, we pivot to focus exclusively on consumer AI enhancement without enterprise distraction.
Let me challenge your overall strategic choice. You've selected community intelligence systems as your primary approach, but couldn't Microsoft or Google simply acquire Reddit to get access to community data and integrate superior AI capabilities? How does your strategy create sustainable competitive positioning if our core asset, the community discussions, could be acquired and integrated into more technically sophisticated platforms?
That's a sobering challenge that forces me to think about Reddit's ultimate strategic defensibility rather than just competitive positioning among social platforms. You're right that our community discussion data could be acquired and integrated into platforms with superior technical capabilities. The key question is whether acquisition would preserve or destroy the community trust and governance relationships that make our data valuable in the first place. Consider what happens if Microsoft acquires Reddit and integrates our discussions into their AI systems. The community relationships that create ongoing high-quality content generation would likely deteriorate due to user concerns about corporate data usage. The volunteer moderation infrastructure that maintains discussion quality might fragment if communities lose autonomy. Most critically, the authentic discussion culture that makes our data valuable depends on users believing their discussions serve community purposes rather than corporate AI training. This suggests that our sustainable competitive positioning depends on community relationship preservation rather than just technical capabilities. The strategic focus should be on deepening community ownership and governance to the point where acquisition becomes practically impossible without destroying the asset being acquired. That could mean evolving toward more radical community autonomy, communities that have genuine economic ownership of their content, democratic control over platform features, and legal frameworks that protect community governance rights. This creates switching costs and acquisition resistance that pure technical capabilities can't overcome. However, this evolution would require fundamental changes to Reddit's business model and ownership structure that go well beyond typical product strategy. It's essentially arguing for platform cooperativism or community ownership models that challenge traditional venture capital and public company frameworks.
You've identified a fundamental strategic tension that most product managers miss. The question of whether Reddit's value can be preserved under different ownership structures gets to the heart of platform strategy. Given that tension, how would you present this strategic analysis to Reddit's board and executive team? What's your final recommendation?
Here's how I'd present this strategic analysis to Reddit's board. We face a fundamental choice between optimizing for near-term financial performance versus building long-term strategic defensibility. The market pressures for revenue diversification and user growth that we're experiencing are real, but they may conflict with preserving the community relationships that create our unique competitive positioning. My recommendation is pursuing community intelligence systems development with explicit board acknowledgement that sustainable competitive advantage may require evolution toward greater community autonomy and economic participation than traditional platform models allow. The immediate strategy involves AI-powered discussion quality improvements that create margin improvements and monetization opportunities while building technical infrastructure for community-controlled intelligence systems. This delivers near-term financial results while creating optionality for longer-term strategic evolution. The strategic choice we need board alignment on is whether Reddit should evolve toward community partnership models where users have genuine economic and governance participation, or whether we optimize Reddit as a traditional platform business that maximizes shareholder value through community engagement extraction. If we choose community partnership evolution, we're pioneering new platform business models that could create sustainable competitive advantages but require patience from investors and acceptance of different growth trajectories. If we choose traditional platform optimization, we face the acquisition and commoditization risks we discussed, but deliver more predictable financial results. My recommendation is the community partnership path because it's the only sustainable long-term strategy that preserves Reddit's unique value creation, but it requires board commitment to a fundamentally different approach to platform business model development than most public companies pursue. The execution timeline remains the same: AI community tools development with measured implementation and community trust preservation. But the strategic horizon acknowledges that Reddit's ultimate success may depend on redefining platform ownership rather than just improving platform features.
That was an incredible demonstration of executive-level strategic thinking from Adrian. What you just witnessed is exactly how senior product managers approach complex platform strategy at the highest levels. Let me break down the key takeaways that separate strategic thinkers from feature managers. First, notice how Adrian approached competitive analysis. When David challenged him about Reddit's defensibility, Adrian didn't just list features or user engagement metrics, he focused on institutional knowledge and community governance infrastructure that can't be easily replicated. He explained why r/ask historians' expertise validation processes and years of accumulated community governance stay embedded in Reddit's platform, even if users migrate. This is thinking about moats at the system level, not just the product level. Second, watch how Adrian handled the trade-off between optimization versus expansion strategies. When David pushed him on whether community intelligence systems could be copied by Google or Microsoft, Adrian didn't retreat into generic competitive advantages. He articulated why community-controlled AI has structural advantages that centralized platforms can't offer due to their business model constraints. This shows understanding of how business models create strategic limitations. Third, the most impressive part was Adrian's evolution throughout the interview. He started with ambitious expansion ideas, but recognized execution complexity when David challenged him on operational overhead and capability gaps. Rather than doubling down on unrealistic visions, he adapted his strategy based on resource constraints and organizational readiness. That's executive-level judgment. Fourth, notice how Adrian addressed market validation concerns. When David questioned enterprise demand for community knowledge commerce, Adrian outlined specific validation approaches with concrete success criteria and kill conditions. He didn't just defend his assumptions, he created frameworks for testing them systematically. Fifth, the way Adrian handled the ultimate strategic question about acquisition risk was particularly sophisticated. Instead of dismissing the threat, he used it to reframe Reddit's fundamental strategic positioning toward community partnership models that create acquisition resistance through structural rather than just competitive advantages. This framework Adrian demonstrated applies to any platform strategy challenge. Start with systematic competitive analysis that goes beyond features to understand structural advantages and business model constraints. Develop strategic options that leverage your unique positioning while acknowledging implementation complexity and resource requirements. Validate market assumptions through concrete testing rather than theoretical analysis. Most importantly, present strategic choices that acknowledge trade-offs and stakeholder tensions rather than pretending every option is equally viable. Here's the strategic thinking process you should master. First,
Analyze the platform's unique competitive positioning, not just versus direct competitors, but across the entire landscape of user needs and market dynamics. Second, develop platform optimization strategies that deepen existing moats and platform expansion strategies that create new market categories where you can establish first-mover advantages. Third, sequence strategic initiatives to manage execution risk while delivering stakeholder value on realistic timelines. Fourth, anticipate competitive responses and build strategies that create sustainable advantages rather than easily copied features. Fifth, understand how different business models create constraints and opportunities for strategic decisioning. Finally, develop frameworks for validating strategic assumptions before major resource commitments. The business sophistication Adrian demonstrated throughout this interview, understanding unit economics, margin implications, organizational capability requirements, and stakeholder communication, this is what separates senior PMs from everyone else. Companies pay premium salaries for this level of strategic thinking because strategic mistakes cost millions, while strategic advantages drive lasting competitive positioning. Notice how Adrian balanced community trust preservation with commercial growth objectives, managed investor timeline expectations while building long-term competitive advantages, and addressed acquisition threats through fundamental business model evolution rather than just defensive positioning. Most importantly, watch how he presented his final board-level summary. He didn't just summarize his strategic choice, he articulated the fundamental strategic tension between traditional platform optimization and community partnership models, then recommended a path that acknowledges this tension rather than pretending it doesn't exist. This kind of strategic thinking framework, market validation approach, and stakeholder communication skill is what senior PM interviews actually test. Whether you're preparing for principal PM roles at Reddit, Meta, Google, or any major platform company, this systematic approach to platform strategy will set you apart from candidates who treat strategy questions like feature brainstorming sessions. If you found this strategic analysis valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're building the most comprehensive PM interview series on YouTube, and there's much more coming. Next week, we're diving into analytical PM interviews with a growth strategy challenge that tests your ability to diagnose metric declines and develop data-driven solutions. Also, grab the complete product strategy framework template in the description. It includes every step of Adrian's strategic analysis process, plus additional examples and common mistakes to avoid when approaching platform strategy questions. Remember, strategic thinking is what transforms product managers into product leaders. It's the difference between executing someone else's vision and creating the vision that shapes entire markets. Keep practicing these frameworks, and you'll be ready to tackle any strategy challenge that comes your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.